Imagine this. In just one moment, a single press of a button can change someone's entire life. That's exactly what happened when Howie Mandel slammed the golden buzzer for Jordan Blue. But who is the man behind that unforgettable moment? What made millions instantly connect with his story? Today, we'll uncover the journey of Jordan Blue, from a life filled with hardship to becoming an inspiration that shook the internet. Trust me, this isn't just about the stage, it's about courage, resilience, and the true meaning of chasing a dream. Jordan Blue's early life and humble beginnings. From the perspective of a news reporter tracing the roots of a story that has now captured millions of viewers around the world, the narrative of Jordan Blue begins not with the bright lights of the America's Got Talent stage but in the quiet corners of his childhood, a background that shaped the man who would later earn Howie Mandel's coveted golden buzzer. Born in a modest town with little fanfare, Jordan grew up surrounded by the everyday struggles that many families face, his parents working long hours to make ends meet while encouraging their son's curious and creative spirit. And those who knew him during those early years often recall a boy who seemed to carry a spark that set him apart. Whether it was the way he hummed tunes under his breath while helping with household chores or how he used his school's limited resources to create small performances for classmates, signaling even then a talent that wanted to break free. Local teachers described him as both quiet and intense, a student who listened carefully but who transformed when given the chance to stand in front of others, suddenly projecting a confidence that belied his otherwise reserved nature. And neighbors remember community events where Jordan, still just a boy, would find his way to a microphone and sing with an ease that made people stop and listen. Yet, his path was not one paved with privilege, as financial difficulties forced him to balance youthful dreams with the reality of helping his family, often taking on odd jobs and small tasks just to contribute. And it is in these humble beginnings that the resilience and determination that later defined his rise can be traced. For unlike many performers who come from established artistic families or who had access to professional training, Jordan's foundation was built on raw persistence and the support of a community that recognized potential even when the opportunities to nurture it were scarce. According to some locals, Jordan's family home was often filled with music, not from expensive instruments but from old radios and secondhand guitars passed down through relatives, and he would spend hours mimicking voices he heard, experimenting with tones, and trying to understand how emotion could be translated into sound, a habit that soon became a defining feature of his style. This early exposure to the power of expression through music created in him a sensitivity that would later resonate deeply with audiences, for even before fame found him, Jordan's singing was less about technical perfection and more about connection, about reaching into hearts with an authenticity that couldn't be faked. By his teenage years, the contrast between his limited environment and his soaring ambitions was evident, as he often confided to friends that he wanted to perform on stages bigger than anything he had ever seen. A dream that seemed almost impossible at the time given the family's lack of means, yet his persistence was remarkable, turning garages into makeshift rehearsal spaces and backyards into impromptu stages, places where he could not only practice but also begin to shape the performer he would become. Looking back, it is clear that Jordan Blue's early life tells the classic story of an underdog, one that news outlets often highlight not only because of its inspirational value but because it underscores the wider narrative of hope, determination, and the idea that extraordinary talent can emerge from the most ordinary beginnings. Thus, when audiences today marvel at the man behind Howie Mandel's golden buzzer, it is important to remember that his journey started long before the cameras, in the quiet persistence of a boy who refused to let hardship silence his dream, and this first chapter in his life remains the lens through which we can understand the depth and impact of the artist he has become. Teenage years and big dreams. As Jordan Blue stepped into his teenage years, the contours of his ambition began to sharpen, and what had once been a quiet child humming tunes in his living room transformed into a young man determined to carve out a future far larger than the limits of his small-town upbringing, a transformation that did not go unnoticed by those around him. Reporters looking back at this period often note that adolescence is a time when many young people drift between uncertainty and experimentation, yet Jordan seemed to navigate it with a singular focus: music. For while his peers were absorbed in sports, parties, or the routine distractions of teenage life, Jordan spent countless hours writing lyrics in worn notebooks, strumming chords on a battered guitar, and recording rough demos on secondhand equipment, all while harboring the unshakable belief that one day the world would hear his voice. Classmates recall him as someone who straddled two worlds, quiet and almost shy in the classroom but a different person entirely at talent shows or school assemblies, where his performances, raw though they were, carried an emotional intensity that drew in audiences far beyond his years. In interviews with former teachers and mentors, many describe the same phenomenon. A young man whose grades may not have stood out but whose drive and discipline in music set him apart, sometimes even leading him to skip typical teenage hangouts in favor of practicing late into the night. By the age of 15, Jordan had already begun to dream out loud, telling friends that he would one day make it onto a stage where millions could see him, statements that drew both admiration and skepticism, because while everyone recognized his talent, the path from a small town to international recognition seemed impossibly steep, and yet this was precisely what fueled Jordan. He thrived on the idea of defying the odds, of turning disbelief into motivation, and each rejection at local competitions or dismissive comment from critics only seemed to strengthen his resolve. There are stories of him traveling hours just to audition for small gigs, sometimes returning home without having been chosen but refusing to let discouragement take root, instead treating every setback as a stepping stone, evidence of a resilience that was becoming his trademark. According to those who knew him best, the teenage Jordan also developed a deep fascination with the psychology of performance, often studying how audiences reacted not just to music but to emotion, posture, and storytelling, insights that would later make his stage presence so compelling that even seasoned judges like Howie Mandel could not look away. It was during this period that Jordan also began to understand the power of vulnerability, writing songs that dealt not with abstract ideas but with his own struggles, loneliness, self-doubt, and the constant balancing act between responsibility to his family and loyalty to his dreams, themes that resonated with peers who saw in him not just a performer but a mirror of their own unspoken feelings. As a reporter retracing these years, one sees not just a boy chasing fame but a young artist shaping the foundation of what would become a career defined by authenticity. And while many in his community were unsure whether his bold declarations of future stardom would ever materialize, Jordan never seemed to doubt himself, carrying in his teenage years the same conviction that would later propel him into the spotlight of America's Got Talent. In retrospect, his teenage dreams were not just idle fantasies but a roadmap, one he drew with relentless determination and an unbreakable belief that music was not only his calling but his destiny. Early struggles in chasing his dream. When examining the early struggles of Jordan Blue's pursuit of his dream, it becomes clear that his path was anything but easy, and while many fans today see only the polished performer who stood under the golden confetti of Howie Mandel's buzzer, the years leading up to that moment were filled with countless obstacles, disappointments, and sacrifices that nearly broke him more than once. As a teenager stepping into adulthood, Jordan found himself caught in the familiar paradox of raw talent and limited opportunity, working odd jobs to support his family while scraping together every dollar he could to afford basic recording equipment or to travel to auditions in nearby cities. And these were not glamorous trips but often long bus rides or borrowed cars that left him exhausted before he even stepped into the audition room. Time and again, he was turned away by industry professionals who saw in him nothing more than another dreamer among thousands. And those rejections cut deeply, not only because they challenged his confidence but because they threatened the very belief that music could be his way out of hardship. Yet each rejection seemed to fuel a stubborn fire inside him, making him return even stronger the next time, often with a new song, a refined performance, or simply a more determined look in his eyes. There are accounts from friends and early collaborators who recall how Jordan would sometimes come back from failed auditions looking devastated, only to spend the next day locked in a makeshift studio space in his garage, pouring every ounce of frustration into melodies and lyrics that spoke of struggle, longing, and resilience, songs that would one day resonate with a far larger audience. It is also during this period that Jordan faced the harsh realities of balancing survival with ambition, working long shifts as a waiter, warehouse assistant, and even delivery driver while still trying to carve out time to chase auditions or perform at open mic nights, and the exhaustion of living in two worlds, one of obligation and one of aspiration, nearly drove him to quit more than once. Reports from those years indicate that he even considered giving up on music entirely, with close friends recalling late-night conversations where Jordan confessed that maybe his dream was unrealistic, maybe the odds were stacked too high, but somehow, whether through sheer determination or a refusal to betray the younger version of himself who had once declared he would make it, Jordan always managed to pick himself back up. Another defining struggle came from the lack of formal training, as unlike many of his peers who had access to vocal coaches, producers, and polished studios, Jordan had to teach himself through trial and error, recording countless takes on cheap microphones, watching endless tutorials, and slowly building not just his voice but his understanding of what it meant to connect through song. These struggles, while painful in the moment, were in hindsight what gave his artistry its edge, because every note he sang carried the weight of someone who had fought tooth and nail for the chance to be heard. And it is precisely this authenticity, born from hardship, that later allowed him to cut through the noise of reality television auditions and touch the hearts of millions. As a reporter retracing his journey, one cannot help but note that the struggle itself became part of his brand. The story of the underdog who refused to surrender even when the odds were stacked against him, and this chapter of his life serves as both a testament to his resilience and a reminder that before the fame, there was a young man who stood at countless closed doors, knocking again and again until one finally opened. The breakthrough moment. The breakthrough moment for Jordan Blue did not arrive in a neat package, nor did it come suddenly without years of struggle. It was the culmination of countless small steps, each one building toward the night when his name would trend worldwide after capturing Howie Mandel's golden buzzer on America's Got Talent. But to understand why this moment was so powerful, we have to examine how it unfolded, because what many viewers saw as an overnight success was in fact the carefully layered product of years of perseverance, sacrifice, and quiet determination that had led him to that exact stage. When Jordan auditioned, there was already a palpable tension in the air, as those in the room could sense his nervous energy, yet as a reporter retracing the event, one can see how that nervousness translated into authenticity rather than weakness, because his story, his demeanor, and ultimately his performance carried the raw truth of someone who had clawed his way to that stage against impossible odds. According to production insiders, Jordan's audition almost didn't happen, as he had debated whether the expenses of travel and preparation were worth it after years of rejection. But something inside him, a final push of hope, compelled him to go, and that decision changed everything. When he stepped onto the stage, the judges were struck by his humility, his soft-spoken introduction, and the way he seemed simultaneously fragile and unshakably determined, a duality that made the audience lean in even before the first note was sung. Then came the performance itself, a hauntingly emotional song that Jordan had written during one of his lowest points, and as he sang it live for the world to hear, there was a moment when the entire room fell silent, a silence so complete that it seemed everyone understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that transcended the typical talent show audition. When Howie Mandel rose to his feet and slammed the golden buzzer, showering Jordan in confetti, the reaction was explosive, with the audience erupting into cheers, the judges visibly moved, and social media immediately lighting up with clips, hashtags, and praise from viewers who felt they had just discovered a once-in-a-generation voice. But beyond the spectacle, what made this breakthrough moment unforgettable was the context. The knowledge of how many times Jordan had been turned away, how many doors had been slammed in his face, and how close he had come to giving up entirely, all of which gave the golden buzzer a weight far greater than just television theatrics, transforming it into a symbol of redemption, perseverance, and validation for every struggling dreamer who had ever wondered if they should keep going. Reporters covering the story in the days that followed highlighted not just his voice but his narrative, because in a media landscape saturated with talent, it was the authenticity of his journey that made Jordan Blue a headline name. A reminder that even in an age of instant fame, true breakthroughs are still built on years of quiet struggle. And this defining moment marked the precise turning point when Jordan stopped being just another aspiring singer and became an artist with a story the world wanted to follow. Rising recognition and first taste of fame. In the weeks and months following his golden buzzer moment, Jordan Blue's life underwent a transformation so swift and dramatic that it almost seemed like a scripted movie. Yet as reporters chronicled his journey, it became evident that this was the very real story of an artist suddenly thrust into the blinding spotlight of fame, grappling with both the exhilaration of recognition and the daunting pressures it brought. His performance had gone viral within hours, generating millions of views across YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, with hashtags bearing his name climbing trending charts and fan accounts springing up overnight. And the once anonymous young man who had spent years performing in small local venues was now being stopped on the street by strangers who recognized him from television. Journalists noted the surreal contrast in his life. Just days earlier he had been waiting tables to pay rent, and suddenly he was fielding interview requests from national outlets, being invited onto morning talk shows, and even appearing in entertainment magazines alongside established stars. Insiders reported that record labels who had once dismissed him were now scrambling to get his attention, sending representatives to his shows and bombarding his team with offers, a turnaround so dramatic that it underscored the fickle nature of the industry. Yet amid the chaos, Jordan remained strikingly grounded, often emphasizing in interviews that he was grateful simply to be heard, and that he still felt like the same person who had struggled for years, an attitude that endeared him further to fans who saw in him not just a talented singer but a humble and relatable figure navigating the surreal experience of sudden fame. His social media following ballooned into the hundreds of thousands, then millions, and each post, whether a clip of him singing, a casual behind-the-scenes moment, or even a simple message of thanks, would receive floods of comments, likes, and shares. Evidence of a rapidly growing fan base emotionally invested in his story. However, while the recognition was intoxicating, reporters also pointed out that Jordan's first taste of fame carried with it immense pressure, as every new performance and public appearance was now scrutinized, every word he spoke dissected for meaning, and every move he made watched by an audience eager to see if he would live up to the promise of his Golden Buzzer audition. Still, his ability to navigate this delicate balance between authenticity and expectation in those early days was what began to define his public persona. For while many contestants fade quickly after their initial moment, Jordan capitalized on his momentum with a combination of sincerity, talent, and relentless work ethic, showing that he was not just a viral sensation but an artist determined to build a lasting career. It was during this period that he began to perform at larger venues, opening for more established acts and, in some cases, headlining smaller tours of his own, and these performances became testaments to his ability to connect with audiences not just through television screens but in live settings where his raw vocals and emotional storytelling could cut through the noise. Industry analysts covering his rise frequently remarked that his story represented the ideal narrative arc for reality television talent shows. The underdog whose authenticity carried him from obscurity to stardom. Yet what made Jordan Blue stand apart was his ability to turn that narrative into a sustainable foundation, converting fleeting viral fame into genuine recognition that marked the first true chapter of his career in the spotlight. Facing the dark side of fame. As Jordan Blue's name climbed the ranks of celebrity recognition, the glow of success was inevitably shadowed by the darker realities of sudden fame, a truth reporters often highlight when covering the trajectory of rising stars, and in Jordan's case the shift from anonymity to constant visibility came with emotional and personal costs that he could never have fully anticipated. While fans adored his humble personality and raw talent, the same attention that brought him admiration also subjected him to invasive scrutiny, with tabloids scouring his past for any detail that could be twisted into a headline, and social media magnifying every misstep into viral fodder, creating a storm of speculation that sometimes overshadowed his artistry. Friends and acquaintances who once cheered him from the sidelines began leaking old stories or photos to gossip outlets, often exaggerated or misrepresented, leaving Jordan to defend himself against narratives that painted him as someone entirely different from the person fans had come to love. Critics, too, emerged more fiercely than before, some questioning whether his Golden Buzzer moment was deserved, others accusing him of being just another reality TV creation destined to fade, and the constant barrage of online commentary, praise and vitriol alike became a mental burden, with reporters noting visible changes in his demeanor during interviews as the pressure of maintaining a flawless image began to weigh on him. Behind the scenes, industry insiders revealed that he faced grueling schedules, relentless travel, and a loss of personal privacy that left him exhausted, with even simple acts like meeting friends at a cafe turning into chaotic encounters with paparazzi and fans, stripping him of the normalcy he once cherished. As journalists covering his career observed, this period marked the first time Jordan confronted the paradox of fame, that the very exposure which catapulted him to success also left him vulnerable to public dissection, and while he tried to maintain composure, close confidants admitted he struggled with anxiety and bouts of self-doubt, questioning whether he truly belonged in the rarefied air of celebrity. Furthermore, the financial pressures of success became another challenge, as with fame came expectations to hire teams, stylists, and managers, and the constant tug-of-war between artistic integrity and commercial appeal often forced him into difficult decisions about what kind of music he wanted to release and how he wished to present himself. News outlets that had once celebrated his underdog story began running critical pieces whenever his performances didn't match the impossible standard set by his breakthrough audition, proving that the media's love affair with rising stars can be as fleeting as it is intense. Yet amid the turbulence, what stood out to reporters was Jordan's resilience, for though he faced the darker side of fame in all its complexity, betrayals, criticism, exhaustion, and loss of privacy, he continued to press forward, showing not only a commitment to his craft but also a willingness to confront these challenges head-on. And in doing so, his story deepened from that of a simple Golden Buzzer fairy tale into the nuanced portrait of a young man learning to navigate the treacherous terrain of celebrity culture, where every triumph is shadowed by potential pitfalls and every smile on stage hides the battle scars earned behind closed doors. Jamal's biggest career milestone. When reporters trace the arc of Jordan Blue's meteoric rise, one moment is repeatedly cited as the definitive milestone that solidified his transition from a reality show discovery to a recognized artist with staying power, and that moment came with the release of his debut major project. A record that not only showcased his distinctive voice but also demonstrated his ability to craft music that resonated beyond the fleeting glare of television fame. The anticipation leading up to its release was intense, with media outlets covering every detail from the producers he collaborated with to the themes hinted at in early teasers. And when the project finally dropped, it exceeded expectations, quickly climbing streaming charts and receiving praise from critics who had initially been skeptical of his staying power, with some even labeling him the rare case of a talent show contestant who managed to parlay viral momentum into credible artistry. Reporters covering the story highlighted that what made this milestone particularly impactful was the authenticity of his music, as the songs were infused with personal narratives of struggle, resilience, and hope, giving listeners a window into the man behind the headlines and proving that his artistry was not manufactured but deeply rooted in his lived experiences. The record earned him invitations to perform on prestigious stages, including late-night television and high-profile festivals, appearances that further cemented his reputation as a live performer capable of holding his own among seasoned acts, and perhaps most significantly, it won him his first major award nomination, a moment captured in countless photographs showing Jordan visibly emotional as he reflected on the journey from obscurity to recognition by industry peers. Journalists noted that beyond the accolades, the milestone also marked a turning point in how he was perceived by the industry at large, as record executives, collaborators, and even competitors began treating him not merely as a television personality but as an artist whose voice and vision carried weight in the cultural landscape. Fans, too, embraced the project as a symbol of shared triumph, recalling his golden buzzer moment and celebrating how far he had come, and social media buzzed with hashtags declaring pride in his accomplishments, effectively transforming his personal success into a communal victory for the millions who had supported him from the beginning. Yet, as much as this milestone represented validation, reporters were quick to underscore that it also elevated the stakes, for with success came the expectation to deliver at an even higher level in future projects, setting the stage for what many described as the most critical phase of his career, maintaining momentum while staying true to himself. Still, there was no denying the magnitude of the achievement, and in the annals of entertainment journalism, Jordan Blue's first major career milestone remains a defining chapter, one that encapsulated the promise, potential, and peril of turning a reality show spotlight into a lasting place in the broader cultural conversation. Giving back, using his platform for good. As Jordan Blue's profile rose from a golden buzzer sensation to an established recording artist, another dimension of his story began to emerge, one that reporters and fans alike identified as just as important as his artistic achievements. His commitment to giving back and using his newfound platform to effect meaningful change in the lives of others. While the entertainment industry often highlights glitz, glamour, and chart success, coverage of Jordan increasingly included accounts of his philanthropy, community involvement, and advocacy work, with journalists noting that he consistently carved out time from his demanding schedule to connect with causes that reflected his personal values, particularly those tied to the struggles he himself had faced on his way to the spotlight. One of the earliest examples came when he partnered with a local foundation that provided music education and resources to underprivileged youth, offering not only funding but also his presence, surprising children in classrooms with performances and candid conversations about resilience, effectively turning his personal story into a motivational tool for the next generation. Reporters covering these visits described scenes of children lighting up with excitement, inspired by someone who had once been in their shoes and who now embodied the possibility that dreams, however improbable, could be achieved. His outreach did not stop there, as Jordan also became a visible advocate for mental health awareness, speaking openly in interviews about the anxiety and self-doubt that accompanied his rapid rise to fame, a level of vulnerability that resonated with fans who admired not only his talent but also his willingness to confront difficult topics in public. And these efforts culminated in his support for nationwide campaigns that aimed to reduce the stigma around seeking help, with his own story serving as a reminder that even those who appear confident and successful may be fighting unseen battles. His philanthropy extended beyond advocacy into direct action, as he frequently donated proceeds from shows to charitable organizations and even launched scholarship initiatives to assist aspiring musicians in funding their education. decisions that reporters framed as emblematic of an artist refusing to let fame distance him from the realities faced by ordinary people. In community events, he was often described as approachable and genuine, taking the time to listen as much as he spoke, and his humility stood in stark contrast to the sometimes aloof image cultivated by celebrities of similar stature. Entertainment journalists emphasized that these acts of giving back enhanced his public image not as a strategy but as a reflection of character. And in doing so, they created a narrative in which Jordan was not merely a rising star but also a role model, someone who understood the responsibility that came with influence. Indeed, the more his career grew, the more he sought ways to align his music with his activism, incorporating themes of hope, unity, and perseverance into his lyrics, thereby ensuring that his art and his outreach reinforced one another in powerful ways. As one widely circulated article put it, Jordan Blue's legacy would not be measured solely by records sold or awards won but by the impact he had on individuals who found strength in his story, and for many fans, his decision to leverage fame for good confirmed that he was not just another name in the entertainment cycle but a figure who genuinely aspired to make the world better than he found it, a sentiment that continues to define his narrative in the eyes of the media and the public alike. Overcoming personal loss and hardship. As much as the story of Jordan Blue has been defined by triumph and inspiration, reporters covering his career have consistently underscored another thread that runs through his journey: the personal losses and hardships that tested not only his resolve as an artist but his strength as a human being, shaping the way he related to fans and deepening the authenticity of his public persona. One of the most poignant episodes frequently cited in coverage was the sudden passing of a close family member during the peak of his early fame, a loss that forced Jordan to navigate the collision between personal grief and professional obligations under the relentless gaze of the public eye, with journalists noting that while many young stars might have retreated from the spotlight, Jordan instead chose to speak candidly about his mourning process, using interviews and performances as outlets to honor the memory of the loved one he lost. Those who reported on this period observed that his vulnerability, far from diminishing his standing, actually strengthened the bond between him and his audience, as fans saw in him not just a celebrity but a person who shared in the universal experience of loss, one who gave them permission to grieve openly in their own lives. His struggles, however, were not limited to bereavement, as he also faced periods of career uncertainty and personal doubt, particularly during the transitional phases when the industry's expectations grew heavier and the pressure to constantly outperform himself threatened to erode his confidence. Investigative pieces highlighted how whispers of burnout, mental strain, and even moments of wanting to step away from the spotlight altogether began to surface, with some insiders recounting tense moments backstage when Jordan wrestled with whether the sacrifices demanded by fame were worth the toll on his well-being. And yet, time and again, he found ways to transform these challenges into sources of strength, channeling pain into creative expression and resilience into public advocacy, thereby reframing hardship as an integral part of his growth rather than an obstacle to his progress. Reporters covering his return to the stage after a particularly difficult stretch described audiences moved to tears as he performed ballads imbued with raw emotion, performances that many interpreted as both catharsis and tribute, solidifying his reputation as an artist unafraid to weave his lived struggles into his art. And while not all of his hardships were publicized, some remained tightly held within his inner circle. The glimpses that were shared revealed a man who refused to let suffering define him, choosing instead to carry it as a reminder of the fragility and resilience of life. In this way, Jordan Blue's narrative evolved beyond that of a talent show breakout or rising star, becoming a broader story of endurance in the face of life's harshest realities, and for many reporters chronicling his career, this theme of overcoming personal loss became the cornerstone of why his story resonated so powerfully, reminding audiences that behind every polished performance was an individual who had endured, survived, and ultimately found a way to keep moving forward despite the weight of hardship pressing against him. Legacy and lessons for the next generation. As Jordan Blue's career continues to be chronicled, journalists and cultural commentators alike have turned increasingly to the question of legacy, asking not only what his journey represents for him but what lessons it leaves for the generations that follow. And in doing so, they have painted a portrait of a man whose impact extends far beyond music and television into the broader fabric of contemporary culture. To many reporters, his story stands as a textbook example of how resilience, authenticity, and humility can create a legacy more enduring than any trophy or viral moment, For Jordan's path from obscurity to the golden buzzer spotlight and beyond is not just a tale of one man's rise but a roadmap for countless young dreamers who see in him proof that adversity can be transformed into art and hardship into hope. Articles often emphasize that what makes his legacy so compelling is not perfection or an unbroken string of victories but rather the way he turned vulnerabilities into strengths, speaking openly about anxiety, grief, and setbacks, thus modeling a form of leadership built on honesty rather than image, and in a media landscape often dominated by fleeting fame and superficial spectacle. This grounding in authenticity has become, according to several profiles, his most valuable contribution. His willingness to give back, to elevate others through mentorship and advocacy, further cements this legacy, as reporters have noted that many of the young artists he supported now cite him as the reason they pursued their own dreams, ensuring that his influence perpetuates itself in the lives and work of others. And while critics may debate where his artistic output ranks within the broader industry, there is near consensus that Jordan's larger cultural imprint lies in how he has redefined what it means to succeed, suggesting that true success is measured not solely by chart positions or television appearances but by the degree to which one inspires resilience and integrity in others. Journalists often close their features on him with reflections from fans who describe feeling less alone because of his openness or more determined because of his perseverance, framing him as not only a figure of entertainment but also a figure of guidance in an era where young people are searching for authentic role models. His story has therefore become, in the words of one editorial, a mirror of possibility, showing that while fame may fade, the lessons of courage, empathy, and perseverance can ripple outward across generations, leaving a legacy that endures long after the applause has faded and the headlines have shifted to the next story. And it is this enduring resonance, this sense that his life and career provide more than entertainment but a genuine source of hope, that ensures Jordan Blue will be remembered not only as the man behind Howie Mandel's golden buzzer but as a lasting symbol of what it means to rise, give, endure, and ultimately inspire. If Jordan Blue's story inspires you, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video so more people can feel the impact, and of course subscribe so you never miss more powerful stories like this. And let me know in the comments, do you think Jordan Blue deserves to be called the voice of a new generation of dreamers?